It is 8:30 on Saturday, the 27th of April. Um, just a few updates to let you know how things are going at the Gosse family house. Before too long, I like to get in there every now and again and let you know what's happening. I've got almost a dozen different things I can come across and give you brief bits of information on. And I apologize again for the sound quality. I'm still trying to get that figured out. The acoustics in this room are pretty bad. So, in the past week, since we last chatted, I had Frederick out here, and he's been a big help. He's a member of the advisory board, the committee, whatever you want to call it. Everything's unofficial still yet. Nothing got solidified or ratified by corporations, which is kind of good. I'll get to that shortly. Here's a big help. It's been a cleansing ritual experience for him, and that's healthy. We got a lot of chatting done and reacquainting. It's been a while since we actually had a proper, solid conversation due to a lot of life getting in the way. He did, however, help a lot with the construction project that my father's doing. He was commissioned by my mother to build a breakfast nook. It's 15 feet by 10 feet with the corners cut off. So it's half of an irregular octagon, I suppose. 4 sides protruding from the house, 5 sides protruding from the house, and then the wall. So that's entertaining. We have some foundations poured. We had to tear off all the deck boards, the joists, the beams, the railway ties that the deck was sitting on top of, digging a trench. We had to excavate a rather large railway tie sunken into concrete, which was a migraine. We dug a trench, built a form, poured the concrete by hand, but it's all, the forms are now removed and it's all copacetic. Frederick and I did the math, and it turns out we were eating over 1,000 calories per meal during the contract construction type work. It's more difficult now that he's not here. Yeah, sorry for the hair. It's more difficult now that he's not here because you don't have that teamwork gusto type stuff that I learned when I was in the forces. But that's okay too. I'll say it's good to be back out here, back home. The wood stove and fresh air and the gale force winds. But it won't be the same as living out there in the woods. Here there's almost not a tree to be found, just because the site has been stripped bare for the community that was here about 100 years ago, and no trees were really replanted. That would be quite a change when I start living out in the woods in St. Vincent's. Making more notes. Another thing too is we haven't heard from Tim Grady. I'll say Dr. Tim Grady because it annoys him. We haven't heard from him in about 2 weeks. His health is poor, and he's been a great guide to help us with our work, advising me on new methods and new ways of thinking outside the box. To quote him, he thinks so far outside the box you can't even see the box anymore. But that's okay too. Anyway, our prayers go out to Tim, and hopes he gets better soon. Now, my Uncle Rob was a millionaire 20 years ago, 25 years ago. He could easily personally fund the site, but even if he did offer, I wouldn't be interested. It's not the same thing unless you do it by hand. Kind of our objective here. He suggested that tubers, which are a guaranteed sale in this province, aren't worth it, because tubers have very low dollar value. 40 cents a pound, 50 cents a pound for potato, turnip, carrot, whatever. Even here, on an island like Newfoundland, everyone grows them. They're easy to ship in bulk, whole transfer trailer loads. But the amount of money you make per pound, per kilo, per ton, per trailer load is less than other things. And they aren't necessarily the easiest things to grow. though, as I'll mention later, we intend to grow a number of these units, one greenhouse per person, to feed ourselves, but that as a business plan is bound to fail. Robbie, our Uncle Robert Gosse, my father's brother, advised seeking some grants and loans. I think we can get up to $250,000 at 6% interest from First Nations and Indian Affairs, Aboriginal Affairs of Canada. There are some caveats, addendums, and stipulations and stuff, but that's okay too. He advises that we focus on spices, which is actually a component that Tim and I discussed, spices and essential oils, growing sage, sage, rosemary, thyme, try to grow nutmegs, and we can grow all kinds of berries very, very easily, all the high dollar crops. Robert advises that we grow them and focus almost exclusively on that for the first time, because they can be freeze-dried, they can be vacuum-sealed, they can be ground up, they can be packaged, but his idea was blending. You can have a summer blend. I can plant a whole tray, 2 feet by 4 feet sections with the pebble stone and whatever, and we can have sage, rosemary, thyme, basil, and a few other things we know will go together. Grow it together, because they're companion plants, some of them. And when you grow a whole mass of it, we'll just put it to a certain elevation, like a paper cutter, shunk, take off all the greens, dry it, grind it up, and we now have freshly ground, or ground and stored, blends that are relatively reliable. If you take a cup full and sprinkle it over of whatever, and we'll know it'll be a particular volume of each for proportions and concentrations. We can sell those things as a summer blend of whatever we're going to call ourselves spices. There's a place in St. John's he wants me to look into. Haven't had the chance yet, though. We've had one vote from the advisory group. There's 7 of us, of course. Myself, Sarah, Frederick Brown, Mallory Drake, Chris Walker, James Drover, and just due to proximity, Nathan Burton, but that's debatable because he's got a new job and other obligations. But between the 5 and 6 of us, I don't usually vote if I can avoid it. I prefer that the heavy hand of the founder of the Gosse Foundation not be cast too often. I prefer to make the motions, phrase them, organize them, and not actually form an opinion. But we have 1 cast already, and 2 or 3 who are interested but not sure, in favor of going spices first. Robbie said, for argument's sake, call it Indian Head spices. We can use the Man on the Mountain. We could use the Man on the Mountain logo. It's a geographical site. It's just a rock formation in Corner Brook. It's distinctly recognizable to anybody on the west coast of Newfoundland, I suspect. And you can't copyright the rock formation. I can't go to Mount Fuji and say Fuji whatever, because it's a rock. But Old Man on the Mountain, Indian Head, whatever you want to call it, can sell blends. Like, if he suggested diabetics, if there's a particular spice that diabetics can't have, you would have diabetic-friendly blends, and list proportions. We could have acid reflux-friendly blends. We could have, if sage causes allergic reactions, arbitrary spice, we could have sage-free whatever. So that's one way that we can do it. We could also have spice blends that are favorable for pork, spice blends that are favorable for fish, or beef, or lamb, or rabbit, or whatever. And have our individual connections to say a search list, criteria. I'm having pork with carrots and this and this and this and this and this. I can't have this spice, this spice, this spice. Search. And it'll give you a list of meta tag searches. You can have these blends that we currently have concocted, or these individual spices can work and you make your own blend. and we can simply go into the back shop and proportion it off, weigh it off, sell it off in a jar or box it and send it away. Spices store easier than any root vegetables. Fruit we'd have to get rid of pretty fast, because I don't want to have heavy infrastructure on the site, the whole low footprint type stuff. But anyway, that's one issue that we're currently battling right now. I have to do more research into it, I haven't had the chance. And we're also dealing with a poor man's survey. Frederick and I went into the site and took care of some data with a GPS that Thomas lent us for the summer. It's accurate to 6 decimal places, which is 78.41 millimeters, I think. If you get a precise measurement to 6 decimal points, decimal degrees, mind you, for GPS latitude, longitude, at our latitude, which is 48.1 is accurate to about 75 to 78 millimeters. That's 3 inches. I don't know if the tool can get that accurate, but it gave me a reading that size, plus or minus 3 meters, just because of, temperature variances and humidity variances in the atmosphere, throwing off GPS satellites and that kind of thing. But my GPS grid system is accurate to within 3 inches of that GPS. How accurate the GPS was, I can't say. So the survey will allow us to go to any spot on the site, any spot, pull the GPS up and say, with a field book at coordinates 48.12346 by 58.891234, large stone, immovable, GPS coordinates at the center, it's this radius. Log that. Go back home, plug it into the computer, there's a rock. We can now do a completely accurate map based upon GPS, plugging in my coordinates in my grid, and we can now determine large swaths of area based upon this kind of thing. It's a ad hoc method between the old way of doing surveying and the new way we do now. Anyway, that's enough about that. That's what I've done so far. Coming up, we have a trip to Corner Brook tomorrow. Tom's friend is selling my father a truck cap for his 2010 Ford Ranger. That'll be exciting. I can go in and get some groceries and more breakfast stuff. It's cheaper in Corner Brook than it is out here, of course. Rural living. The footings are coming along great. Like I said, the dimensions are 7.5 feet, 2.5 feet, 10 feet, 2.5, 7.5, along 15 feet on the back of the house. That's all well and good. The concrete and footing is poured. The frames are off. It's setting up good. Tomorrow we're going to remove some flowers, I think, after the trip to Corner Brook. Dig out the front flower bed, move them, dig another trench, rebuild the form with the form in place. That way we can actually pour more concrete while that stuff's hardening up and get it all done so we can build the floor. And then, as Dad says, it'll be a dream to install once the floor is square and level. And looking forward to Sarah coming out next weekend. She'll give me a hand to pumping, depending on how much time she can invest out here. And that'll be 6-7 days from now. And like I mentioned, we have got to build a cabin this summer. Tom's going to be moving out there full-time September. Frederick doesn't think he'll be able to spend the winter out there, just due to his other, life obligations. But Tom and I, at minimum, will be living out there full-time, so I need 2 cabins. And the 2 greenhouses, which you are aware of. When I get more information on the spices, I'll definitely toss that your way, and we'll have more information as that arises. So, that's the updates. I'll try and drop back next week and let you know what's going on, and hopefully you won't have to see my face for the next 15, or for another 15 minutes. Either way, cheerio, take care, and without you, there's no community.